In this video, we're going to show you how you can start your own compost pile right in the backyard of your home and how it starts right from your kitchen. Let's get into it. Welcome back to MoonWood Homestead, where we help you become more self-sufficient one project at a time. In today's video, we're going to show you how you can start your own compost pile right from your garden in your backyard and how it starts right from your kitchen. So if you don't already have one, what you're going to want is a compost bucket. This is incredibly important. It makes it really simple for you to remember to compost all of those items that you can use in your kitchen. Most importantly, it's usually any kind of produce that you have, any kind of eggshells, anything like that, you can take and just pitch right in this bucket. Ideally, you want to cut it down if you can, because it makes it easier and faster for it to decompose. But either way, as long as it's in here, you can utilize it. You also want to save things like coffee grounds, tea from tea bags, anything like that, that really just will help improve the makeup of your soil and all of the nutrients that are contained therein. Now we keep this right on our countertop and it doesn't bother us at all. If you actually get one like this, we've had two since we started this. We got one now that's much taller because we go through a lot of greens in our home. But we make sure to get them with the filters on the bottom. This makes it to where there is absolutely no smell that comes out of this. You wouldn't know anything was here. That being said, you can take this and keep it right underneath your counter. There's nothing wrong with that either. But once it gets a couple days worth of material, we'll take it then and run it out to our compost pile. Now, if you don't have one of these already, I'll have a link to this one down below that we got from Amazon. There's a lot of other ones you can snag. Some of them are very pretty, some of them are glass, some of them are metal. I've seen all of them work perfectly fine. It's really just what's best for you and your home. We wanted something that was just more robust and could fit more material in it because we go through so much in our home. What you don't want to put in this is anything that animals typically would go for immediately. So meat, bones, any kind of fat content. You can probably avoid even a lot of heavy acidic things. We don't have a whole lot of citrus that we have in our home, so when we do get things like lemons or maybe an orange once in a while, we'll throw that in because one little bit of it doesn't really hurt too much, because we use this for worm composting as well as our hot composting, but nonetheless, all of it is really helpful and beneficial. As long as you avoid those things, you'll be set. Into the composting department of our homestead. We have a couple of things going on over here, but most specifically right here is our hot composting. Now, this was built really simply, rather crudely, with just a few different pallets and some 2x4s that I had locally available to me for free. You don't have to have something like this. You can go much smaller if you have a much smaller space. It's up to you. You can utilize, I've seen wire bins that have been made that you can then just pour your compost into, and they're as small as a trash can. You can even use a trash can. There's nothing wrong with that. We go through a lot of compost here. We just did a whole bunch of planting this morning in our new food forest that we planted up front. So I went through a decent amount of compost, and we want to have as much as we can to backfill that as often as possible. So once we built this, then we had to fill it. So what do you fill it with? We've started with just some basic soil that we had here, mixed in with some coco coir, some leftover, basically all the leftover stuff that we had from the planting that y'all had to do, right? You go to the big box stores and you buy those bags of whatever soil mixes you're getting, or you had it delivered, however you came across it. And you take all those leftovers, and we started that in here. And then we start taking the veggie scraps from the compost bin that you just saw inside, and we start adding it into here. So then it starts to look something like this. Now, to get to this point with what you're gonna see took time, right? But when I pull this back, what's amazing is you'll see a whole lot of worms right near the top. See all these amazing worms? And I promise I did not ask them to come to the top for this video. This is just really nicely done compost. So how we arrived at this was to take our materials, and I come out here with compost from the bin about every 3 days, 2 to 3 days, and we'll take it, and I have a little pitchfork, and I'll pull it back, put it in the center, and cover it back up. And then we'll water it if there's not been a rainstorm come through. We'll water it every so often as well. Ideally, what you're trying to achieve is to get the temperature of this pile up. The higher, the better. You want it anywhere, ideally, a minimum of 80 degrees, but 100 degrees is really where you're gonna start cooking. And between 100 and 120 is that super sweet spot. Higher than 120 and you're gonna start burning off all of those beneficial microbes and organisms like the worms and such that are in here. They can only take it so hot. But we wet it down, cover it up with the tarp, and close it up. Because of the tarp and because of the way we've done this, the smell is nil. There's nothing. I'm standing right here and I couldn't tell you that I have food scraps that are buried in this, right? So we've never had any pest problems, and we are in Florida, so we definitely have fruit rats and raccoons and possums and all sorts of stuff. Nothing has ever gotten in here, so that's not a problem. Our neighbors have never complained, and it's right next door. In fact, they've utilized some of our compost before and have really enjoyed it. And it takes very little work. You're gonna come out here and you wanna turn this probably once every, I would say when you first get started, every 2 weeks, every week maybe, when you're first getting going. And you're trying to do that because you wanna keep that, all of the material burning down. Now, what happens when you need to get hotter because you're not hitting those temperatures? That's where you need a huge boost of nitrogen. Now, nitrogen is gonna come from anything basically that is still alive, right? As far as greens go, you need something green in here more often than not. The secret that we've come to that works beautifully and has helped us so much with this soil is coffee grounds. You wanna go around to your Dunkin' Donuts, your Wawas, your Starbucks, any coffee houses that you can, and just tell them, hey, I'm doing composting and such, and I wanna utilize it in my garden. Can I get your leftover coffee grounds? And they are almost always happy to do it. Go later in the morning into the early afternoon so that you beat that morning rush, or you're after the morning rush, which gets you more coffee grounds anyways, and try to call ahead of time and let them know that you're coming if you can. It's a great way to get benefit from the community, get something free and easy, and it's gonna vastly improve your temperature. Now, to try to keep the animals and things from getting into this, if you're not able to tarp this or anything else, is browns. So you want stuff like leaves and twigs and things like that that are gonna be able to hide and keep that smell down, but that's also gonna help lower the temperature of the pile in case it gets too hot. Now, I've never experienced it where I've gotten so hot. Now, I've only been doing this for about a year and change now, so maybe I'm not a pro at this yet. Usually it's trying to get it hot enough. So coffee grounds are my secret weapon to make that happen. If you need browns though, the easiest way to do that is gonna be just to get yourself a trash can, hold on to a pile of those leaves, and just use them when you need them. It's really that simple. So, next, we want to take a look at some of the tools that you really need for this. And there's not really many. Of course, you saw the tarp, you saw the space that we've used as far as the pallets go. The big winner here, for me, is the pitchfork. Reminds me of the guy, you know, the farmer dude with the pitchfork, which is always great. But seriously, it's gonna save you so much time, so much effort than trying to use a shovel or hands or anything else like this. It's totally worth it. I got mine from a local big box store. I'll leave a link to one of these that you can get right off of Amazon, but it works perfectly fine. And I leave it right here next to the compost bin for any time I possibly need it. You wanna turn this, like we showed, probably once every about week to 2 weeks when you first get started, trying to keep that heat going. And really that's gonna decide how long it takes you to get your compost. Because we are composted down pretty significantly in this pile already, when I add small food scraps, it doesn't take long between the heat and the worms to get that down. But when you first get going, it's gonna take months before you get your first batch of compost. So we try to keep it ongoing in small amounts, and then we'll do a large new batch of compost at the start of our season, right? The next piece that also is hugely important, and really the best way to figure out if you're doing this right or not, is a thermometer. Now this one is made for composting, so it's got some handy, really specific temperatures that are listed on the dial itself to let you know where you're at in the hot compost process. So you can see on here that it goes green at about 80 degrees up until about 130. Anything between 120 and 130 for me is even still kind of hot. Anything higher than that and you really are killing off stuff, so try not to let it get that high. But again, we're not really overly concerned about that because of how, that I've never really gotten it so hot that I've had that problem. Now, something you want to do to try to get it hot enough to where you are burning everything down though, is making sure you have this mounded. Now, we don't have that right now because we've gone through this so heavily recently doing the projects that we have. But when I go to add more back to this, I'll mound this up so that it gets a really warm core and it can help hit that heavier temperature. What this will do with the worms in there is the worms will spread out to the sides of that hotter core, but they'll utilize that as their bedding, and they'll stay close to that, and then they'll branch out to go eat anything they can on the outskirts. Meanwhile, at the center of that, you're burning all of that great organic matter up into beautiful, beautiful compost. Time out. I'm Brad from the editing phase, and I realized I had a few things that I didn't cover as clearly as I wanted to. So the first, if you're really new to composting, you may not know what greens and browns are. So greens are really nitrogen-rich material, and browns are carbon-rich. So they're very different. Your greens are going to be your scraps from the kitchen, like I went over before, and my favorite, of course, being coffee grounds. Your browns are going to be things like leaves and any kind of wood chips and anything that's just been basically dead, that's brown and dying. When you mix these, you want to mix them in a 3-to-1 ratio. So that means 1 part nitrogen to 3 parts carbon, meaning that you can't do nothing but food scraps. Otherwise, you're going to attract all sorts of stuff, and it's going to start to smell and stink and get really anaerobic, which is awful. So you want to avoid that. So to avoid that, you do your lasagna layered style composting. So this is really, really simple. You take your first bit of carbon, layer them a couple inches thick easily, and then do your food scraps, and then lay another layer of carbon on top of that. And you keep doing this process. If you didn't hot compost like I've showed you that I do, you could just do that layering effect and it would work perfectly fine for you. It would just take about a good 6 months or more, easily maybe even a year before it all decomposed, but it would work. If you do the hot composting method, you're still doing the same thing. You're just mixing it up, and then when you come out next time, you're going to lay your food scraps back on top, and then you're going to layer on top of that another layer of carbon. No matter what, always top it off with carbon, and you'll be perfectly safe. This is the best way not only to keep those scraps from smelling and attracting rodents, but also to actually break down really, really easily for you. And that's it. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you have questions, leave them in the comment sections down below. Don't forget to subscribe either and ring that bell for more content from MoonWood. This is only part 1 of our 3-part compost series that we're going to have. Our next 2 episodes are going to be on worm composting or vermiculture and bokashi composting, which we're really excited to show you guys. So we hope to see you there, and we'll catch you next time. See ya.